My goodness. Okay, thank you, Dave Davis. I'm just having terrible technical difficulties, and I don't really know why. I seem to have lost all my overlays. You notice Bunchy is gone. Is his sound effect? Is his sound effect still here? Yeah, his sound effect is still here. I've just been having terrible technical difficulties. Apologies. But I suppose it's apropos, considering that I screwed up in some of my explanations. Did I just spit? I'm just malfunctioning. I probably should just end the stream now, but I'm not going to. I'm waiting to make sure that me taking myself off mute eventually came through on YouTube. Okay, I'm going to power through this. You guys, let me know if you can hear me. I'm waiting for confirmation because I am just truly sorry about all these technical difficulties. My goodness, I'm going to have to redo all of my templates. Thank you, KC. All of my templates for the screen. All of that fancy, like, real YouTuber shit I did, I deleted it somehow by accident. Well, you know, I have it all saved in files. I'm just going to have to rebuild it all. But boy, it's just been one of those days. It's just been a frustrating day in general. Just one of those things. But I really wanted to do the stream to clear up where I royally screwed up a bit. And I'm kind of embarrassed by it in some of my RCV explanations the other day. But here's the thing. We're all learning. I'm not an expert in this stuff, though I know more about RCV than other voting systems. I've learned quite a bit over these past few days. So before we get started, I did get a new patron. I'm fixing my patron ending screen. I don't have that ready yet, but you know who you are, and I don't know if I have your permission to call you out individually. So you know who you are, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. Anyone else who would really like to be an encouragement to me and the type of work I do, if you can afford it, patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I would truly appreciate it. Now, before we get to how I screwed up, I did want to let you guys know that if you didn't, I have a TikTok. If you didn't know I had a TikTok, that is not by my normal username of Karen Ann Harlos. For things that are like primarily content, well, everything's content driven. I guess I mean pre-planned content driven, not just text posts. I use Pink Flame of Liberty for all of that. And I'm trying to pull up my TikTok for you because I just did a video with them, though if I play it, the copyrighted music's probably going to get me in trouble. So let me see if I can. Okay, if I can pull this up. Yeah, I'm not going to play it, but I wanted to see what my username is, and I believe it is. Yes, it's Pink Flame of Liberty on TikTok. I'd really appreciate it if you would go and subscribe to me there. I'd play the one I just uploaded. But, you know, TikTok has licensing to certain music that they allow you to use, but that doesn't work across platforms. So if I played that TikTok with that background music on YouTube, I'd get a copyright strike. Well, maybe not a strike, but you know what I mean. Complete demonetization, even though a lot of my stuff, because of my mouth like a sailor, though I've been doing much better. You all have to admit, I've been doing much better. And I've been waiting more than 10 minutes into the video. Okay, so where did I screw up in my explanations of RCV? First of all, slight apologies to Joe Scarborough. It was during that Answers with Joe RCV. I kind of took him to task a bit for conflating IRV and STV, treating them as if they were equivalent. And it seemed, and they're not equivalent at all in America. But in doing some more research, and you notice a lot of his discussion dealt with voting systems that other countries are using, and apparently though rarely. Those terms can be conflated in other countries. I think he was reading almost directly from the Wikipedia article, even though the last sentence in the first paragraph of the Wikipedia article does say that STB is almost always used for multi-winner elections, but almost always is not always. So he was not completely wrong that those terms can be equivalent. They're not equivalent, as far as I know, willing to be proven wrong, in America. And that's what I was dealing with. So I wanted to cut him a little slack there because maybe I was a bit too hard on him on my last video. That was error number 1. Error number 2. I'm not going to blame the OPA-Vote interface. I love OPA-Vote. I blame my comprehension of the OPA-Vote interface. Hold on, I wanted to grab my drink I left over here. Because while I was getting set up, which I didn't even do properly, I got confused. It's not their fault. Totally on my fault. Where I thought, and in all the various explanations of RCV, I'm not going to blame the people who explained it. You know, the problem is on the receiving end, not on the sending end. I was understanding it to mean that you had to reach 50%. And then there would be a winner, and that is what RCV was defining as a majority. But a majority is not 50%. A majority is more than 50%. But I was thinking RCV departed there. I don't really, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know where I got such a dumb idea in my head. So no, I'm going to be putting a link to this correction video. Hopefully I'll be able to cut out all that error stuff in the beginning, because it's just funny that I'm doing a video on past errors and just completely had technical difficulties. But no, RCV requires a majority, like a real majority, over 50%. I misstated, mischaracterized in that last video. Confusion totally on my part. Third error. The voting threshold does change. And of course it would have to change if you're requiring an actual majority. Let me explain. I had said in that particular LNC ballot that originally starting out, there were 16 ballots. And because one person didn't participate, they expressly abstained. And that a majority would be 8. Now, of course, a majority wouldn't be 8. A majority would be 9. So I just had that all messed up. And I could show you how I got confused. But anyway, there were 16 ballots to start off. A majority would have been 9. Nobody got 9 in the first round. Nobody got 8 in the first round either. But after the first round, one voter's ballot was exhausted, because all they did was rank one of the, I think it was 6 choices. So then the number of ballots decreases in the second round, because what RCV is doing is mimicking, and I'll say the one way in which it's not mimicking, which would be a legitimate criticism of RCV. It's mimicking multiple rounds. So say you're at the LNC convention like last time, where there were multiple rounds for vice chair. The total number of voters was not the same in each round. People stepped out of the room, people came into the room, people decided not to participate. And the amount from which you calculate a majority is the number of voters that voted in that round, not in the first round. So the number does fluctuate with each round, or it can fluctuate with each round, particularly when you have a potential voting pool, I think it was of 1,004, which is a lot more than just a handful of LNC members. So the amount needed for a majority can change from round to round. I misstated that and said that it stayed at 8, when 8 was wrong to begin with. No. So when Pat Ford's ballot was exhausted after the first round, we then dropped to 15 ballots. at which case a majority would be 8. So I ended up being right with the number 8, but I got there totally the wrong way, because then the 50% mark was 7.5 when you have 15 ballots, and you would have to get more than 7.5. And when you're dealing with people and you're not dealing with a single transferable vote in which fractions of vote get transferred, then that would obviously be 8. So those were my major errors. And let's say on round 2, someone else's ballot got exhausted. This didn't happen, but let's just say it did. Then for round 3, the numbers you'd be working off of would be 14 ballots. Now, majority would remain 8, but still the 50% mark wouldn't be 7.5, it would be 7. So I want to pull up the OPA screen because I want to show you this. But before I do that, I also misstated something else. Boy, I was just full of errors. I mean, the general concept was correct, but I no excuse, okay? There are, though this one's not as big of an error because I did mention this during the show, but I was wrong about one thing. So I was right and wrong. There are multiple ways to break ties in any round in RCV. And it is possible to have a tie in the last round of RCV if you have an even number of voters. So say there were 14 ballots, it is possible to go 7 and 7 with nobody getting 8. So there are, from what I can understand, remember, math is not my strong point. From what I can understand, there are 3 major ways to break ties in standard instant runoff voting. The first is just random. And that's where I misstated. I went back into the OPA Vote user manual, and I know in approval voting, it breaks ties randomly. But in its standard instant runoff module, it does not break ties randomly. It uses what's called backwards tie breaking. We're going to confirm that because I want to make sure it isn't forward tie breaking, but it isn't random. But there's 3 ways to break ties in RCV. Random, backwards, and forwards. So let me explain backwards. Say you have a tie in round 4. Backwards tie breaking means that you would take the 2 that are tied, and whoever was ahead in the immediately previous round is the one that is not eliminated. Does that make sense? You go back to the previous round and you go, oh, so say you had choices A, B, C, and D. And in a certain round, choices C and D were tied. You'd go to the immediately previous round and see who was ahead, C or D, and whoever was the one ahead is the one that progresses forward. That's backwards tie breaking. There's also forwards tie breaking, and that means you would take C and D and see who was ahead in the first round. So it kind of converges. And if they were tied or in the previous round, but weren't the lowest vote getter so that they weren't eliminated, then you'd go to the round before or the round forward, depending on whether you're using backwards and forwards. And what that is calculating, it's either with backwards tie breaking. Okay, now I'm probably going to get this confused. With backwards tie breaking, you are eliminating the one that had more lower ranked votes. So let's just say if that was your final round or close to your final round with the most last place votes. So even though they were tied in this particular round, there was one that had more votes that ranked them lower than the other choice. The other option is which one had more that ranked them higher. Those two are not necessarily the same thing. They can lead to different results. So be various. a slight variation, but it can. And particularly in the final round, if you're using backwards or forwards, tie breaking makes a big deal. So you need to decide ahead of time what type of tie breaking you are going to use. The standard module in OPA-Vote, and I think this is the standard practice in most instant runoff elections, is to use backwards tie breaking. So let's pull up OPA-Vote, and I'll show you where I found this in the documentation. Again, I'm not sponsored by OPA-Vote. It's just the voting software I'm familiar with. Some people last show recommended Ballot Buddy as well. I'm just familiar with OPA-Vote. And I found the owner multiple times in the past very, very helpful. And I like good service. But, you know, I'm sure there are other really good election software out there. Just take a look at their documentation so you understand what kind of tie breaking they're using. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to pull up again the OPA-Vote for the LNC meeting. Okay. So here's round one. This dotted line over here, you can see is at 8. And that's where I misunderstood. This isn't a fault with RCV or a malfunction with OPA-Vote. It's a malfunction with me. I saw that line, and for some reason in my head, I was thinking you had to reach that line to win. No, you have to cross that line to win, which now that I say it, derp, you got to cross the finish line, right? But that's where I got messed up. So in round one, we had 16 ballots. Right there, you could see where it's pulling up that little text box. It says threshold 8.0, 50%. Now, you see there's an exhausted ballot as well. So on this, well, actually, it happened in round 2. So there was a ballot got exhausted in round 2. So when we went to round 3, notice this dotted line moved to the left, because by round 3, we only had 15 ballots, making the threshold 7.5. So it did adjust down. And if we had more exhausted ballots, and you could see the exhausted ballot here, which was for Rhode Island, this would keep going down. And that obviously makes sense. Now, what I want to look at here is, was it this round we had a tie? No. Trying to find what round it was, because I think we did have a tie in a certain round. Yes, here. Yeah, so here we had a tie between Rhode Island and Denver. And it says count after eliminating Rhode Island and transferring votes. The reason Rhode Island got eliminated from round 3, because they were using, I thought it was random, it was using backwards tie breaking. So it looks to the immediate previous round and says which one was ahead. Well, neither of them. They were still tied in round 2. So then it goes to the round before that. Actually, this one may have been random because they were, I wonder what you do if when you go all the way back, they were still tied. Maybe, interesting. Gonna have to look in the documentation. That wasn't a good example, I guess, but normally that's the way it would work. I would suppose I might need to write OPA-Vote that if you keep going backwards and nobody was ahead and they still remain tied and they're in the last place, that you would have to default to random. Okay, so let's go to the documentation. Boy, I'm learning a lot through this. So let's go to the main page, and if we go to help, pretty sure it was here. I should have marked this page. I found it earlier today. Well, let's go back to the console and let's do create count. When you go to create count, instant runoff, and it says tie breaking, backwards, random, forward. See here for recommendations. Okay. Here we go. So recommended voting methods. And I'm trying to find out where it had. So I'm such a dork. Now I can't find where I found about tie breaking. I should have, but let me see. Search this blog. Backward. Tie. No? Well, I'm pretty sure I explained it correctly. But yeah, you got random, backward, and forward. Let me go back here. Yep, right here. Instant runoff voting. The general version of IRV has several options, but note these options are available only for counts and not for elections and polls. By default, IRV uses 0 candidate elimination, backward for tie breaking, skip for remove overvotes, skip for remove undervotes. Okay, so it is backward tie breaking. But I'm trying to find where it explained that, because it does explain that here in this documentation somewhere. I'm trying to find it now. But anyway, you can find it if you search through their stuff. But it's kind of bummed that I just can't find it easily through the search bar. Let's FAQ. Counts. Counting options. Here we go. I found it now. Tie breaking. As with any election, ties may occur in RCV elections. Ties may occur when selecting candidates to eliminate, selecting surplus votes to transfer, that would be for a single transferable vote, or selecting winners. So random, the tie is broken randomly. Backward. The vote count at the previous round is used to break the tie. Suppose we are selecting a candidate to eliminate at round 4 and Alice and Bob are tied for last place. The tie would be broken by comparing Alice and Bob's vote counts at round 3. If they are still tied at round 3, then round 2 is used, and so forth. If the candidates are tied at all rounds, and that's what happened in the LNC one. Denver and Rhode Island were tied at all rounds. Then the tie is broken randomly, so I guessed correctly. Forward. The vote count at round 1 is used to break the tie. Suppose we are selecting a candidate to eliminate at round 4 and Alice and Bob are tied for last place. The tie would be broken by comparing Alice and Bob's vote counts at round 1. If they are tied at round 1, then round 2 is used, and so forth. The candidates are tied at all rounds and the tie is broken randomly. Then they also explain what they mean by candidate elimination. So single candidate elimination means candidates are always eliminated one at a time. 0 is the first time that candidates are eliminated, all candidates with 0 votes are eliminated simultaneously. Afterwards, candidates are eliminated one by one. That's the way we do it at conventions. Then there is where you eliminate losers. All candidates who cannot win the election are eliminated simultaneously. At a given round of counting, one can look at the distribution of votes and determine mathematically which candidates still have a chance of winning and which candidates cannot possibly win. That does not apply at our conventions, because when you're doing actual manual round after round, the deck is cleared. But when you're doing it in RCV, the deck is not cleared. So if you go back to our council here and you do create count, that then makes sense. So candidate elimination 0, means that in the first round, all candidates with 0 votes are eliminated, and then for each subsequent round, they're eliminated one at a time, and backward tie-breaking. I would like to read some articles on the relative advantages of using backward tie-breaking rather than forward tie-breaking. There has to be a reason that's the default. But in my head, I'm thinking I would prefer forward tie-breaking. Wouldn't you want to break the tie, it just seems to me, from the candidate that had the most votes in round 1? So I guess it's whether you prioritize the candidates that are most favored, or whether you want to keep the candidate that's most favored or eliminate the candidate that's most disfavored. So I guess it all depends on how you prioritize that. Me personally, unless someone would like to convince me otherwise, I think I would want to keep the candidate that's most favored rather than eliminate the candidate that's most disfavored. And it seems to me that is what backwards tie-breaking is doing, whereas forward tie-breaking would be what I'm advocating. But standard IRV, it's backwards. So there has to be a political science reason for that. And then when all else fails, it goes to random. So I, once again, inadvertently told you the right answer in that last video where I said the tie between Rhode Island and Denver was broken randomly. But that was, I lucked into that. And that was only because Rhode Island and Denver were tied in all of the previous rounds. So I ended up being right, but not for the right reasons. So I have learned so much this week that I didn't know. Each RCV election that I try to break out and explain, and I would recommend this to everybody. Anyone who's a fan of alternative voting methods, take every opportunity you can to manually explain it to other people, because little unexpected situations will come up. And if you're going to be explaining this to the general populace, you've got to know how to answer these questions. Now, I had a very interesting question posed to me by Mike Seebeck's son that I don't know the answer to, that I'm going to have to ask the RCV people. And he had said if he had an RCV ballot, now forget about whether asking why you would want to do this or whether doing this is a good idea or not. That wasn't his question. His question was, can I do this? And he wanted to know if he had an RCV ballot, which he had a rank 1, 2, 3, 4, could he rank somebody number 1 and rank somebody number 4 and skip 2 and 3? And that boggled my mind. I've never been asked that question before. And quite honestly, I don't know the answer to it. I don't even know how that would work. So I'm going to ask the RCV people here in Colorado, the people that are pros at this, if any of you in the audience know the answer to that and the explanation, let me know. My first instinct was no, because I think that would be a spoiled ballot after round 1. Because how do you know when to jump in for number 4? Because it goes from choice 1, 2, 3, and the only time your ballot would jump from number 1 to number 4 is if your second and third place choices were eliminated in prior rounds. So I suppose perhaps number 4 would be counted if the ones you left unranked were already eliminated. I don't know. That was just such a good question. And like, leave it to a young person to just like pop off with that. And I'm like, good question. I don't know. Once I know the answer to that, I'll run it by you guys. You want to know? I wonder, I'm going to try to experiment with that in OPA vote. I'm going to create like an election, just make one up and try turning in a ballot that only ranks 1 and 4 and see what the software does with it. That would be very interesting. Okay, everyone. JJ asked me, have I ever read Multi-Candidate Election Surprises? Is that an article? Perhaps. I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think I have, but I may have, because I've read a lot on alternative voting methods, but I normally stick with single candidate. Is that what you mean by multi-candidate? Do you mean single transferable vote races, or do you mean multiple examples of candidate election surprises in alternative voting? Yeah, I would like to. If it's really heavy in math, I telling you, I get a headache. But I'd like to try to read it. Math is not my strong point. And while I was going through this, just to give you guys an explanation, hopefully I explained this right. I know what a lot of people will say is that the fairest, best election method is the one that will pick the Condorcet candidate. Who the Condorcet candidate is a candidate that would win in a face-to-face runoff against every other candidate that's in the race if there were a face-to-face election just with that other candidate. So that becomes very mathematical, very tricky. There are certain RCV methods that are more likely to elect the Condorcet candidate. Okay. I think that's it. Yes, so I would like to read that. JJ, hopefully, even though that got a bit into the weeds again, that helped explain things better. Hopefully it helped whet your appetite to learn more and more about RCV. And I'll let you know the answer to that. Can I rank 1 and 4 once I find out the answer? Okay, you guys, I hope you have an awesome night. I also figured out last time why my closing music wasn't playing. I haven't updated, again, my patrons. Hopefully I'll have that done by tomorrow. And hopefully I'll do... Oh, excuse me. Hopefully I'll be doing a show tomorrow. I'm getting ready to travel to Virginia. So I'm really busy right now. But, you know, I do try to stream every night. So probably be a history show tomorrow. All right, y'all. I hope you have an awesome night. And again, if you can afford it and you like my work, if you would please consider becoming one of my patrons at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. All right, have an awesome night.